Yeah, hey, today I'm here with my dad, and I'm here because one cause of depersonalization is trauma, and to get out of depersonalization for these people, it can really help to understand your trauma and maybe heal from your trauma. And that's why I'm here with my dad, because he has an entire lifetime of experience with his fluidification bodywork and patients, and also has done loads of hospice work. And yeah, so I got him to share a little bit of his opinion. So maybe you can say a little bit about yourself.
You mean like I'm apparently old and worn out? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, I've been working on people's bodies since I was young, in my teenage years. And the kind of body work that I did, you actually had to touch people and relax yourself and feel them. And that meant that you felt their emotion and their tension and their trauma and their freaking out. And eventually I ended up having his sister, our daughter died. That was major trauma. And then for many, many years after that, I worked with acutely chronic, that's German, with children in Germany, with children who have acute diseases that'll live between 2 and 5 more years. I spent an awful lot of time around the subject of death, but that's not really true. It's not about death. When you're alive, it's about trauma, not death. And you have to, it's important when any traumatic event happens that you first realize that whatever happened out there is only part of the injury. And what happens to you is always a double injury. It's your body and your mind. And if you don't think about it like that, you won't address everything you need to know. And I've spent a lifetime actually being patient and caring with people and making sure people at least thought about both sides of that equation.
Okay, so you talked about 2 types of trauma, one physical and one mental. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Almost with any kind of trauma, it feels like you're in shock. And it's a little bit of a mental whoa. And you don't realize that your heart has done the same thing. It's actually compressed. It actually is in a permanent state of stress at the moment. Your blood pressure's changed. You're literally going through physical changes that will injure your body if they're prolonged. And everybody's so in shock, they're just amazed at their mind. Oh my gosh, what am I going to think, what am I going to do? They actually overlook the physical stuff that's going on. And basically what that means is, about physical is what you want me to talk about. Physically, your body loses its stasis, it loses its harmony. Even your metabolism, you don't eat, you don't move around normal, you don't sleep. And the key physically is, if your body gets out of sync like that, it starts to make everything worse, including your mind and your brain chemistry. So the key is to do whatever you can to get your body as normal as possible. For me, I went running a lot. For other people, they went swimming. For other people, it was being hugged nonstop. But whatever makes you relax that breath back in here, and that's so hard to do because it feels like you're sinking into the pain where you scream. And that's your calm space where your body works best. But suddenly it's inhabited by this big cramp of pain. And then there's a chore. You literally have to figure out, how do I live with this and still work? I didn't feel that pain too much when I went running. I could get into it. Or playing basketball, or whatever works for you. I met one lady, she couldn't do anything unless she was knitting. And then she got calm again. That was her space. If you don't find something like that for your physical body, I never saw anyone who had any success with the mental trauma.
Okay, next, now you talked more about the physical trauma. Could you go a little bit into the mental trauma, like what exactly mental trauma actually is?
I think the first part of mental trauma is nobody understands they have it. You're experiencing the physical pain, you can't cope with this, it's overwhelming you. If somebody died, you don't want to live. And everybody thinks that mental trauma is about what you're thinking, or about what your ideas are about what happened. But actually it's a dysfunction. You can't think properly anymore. You cannot actually be realistic, rational. You can't plan for anything because it's such a brand new experience. It's like all of a sudden, part of you is mute in your brain and you don't know it. And it's being overwhelmed by the pain, the cramp, and the physicalness. So the mental trauma, in order to deal with it, you have to start by regulating your body and getting your breath at the very least. And then you have to recognize what mental trauma is. And almost everybody has to say, everybody jumps the gun and say, I'm injured forever. I never want to live. They get extreme. The only part of the mental world they're in is extremism. And that's what mental trauma is. You get into some hyper crazy extreme thoughts and you can't escape. You get into an addiction and you can't get out. It's the same kind of thing. Mentally, what you have to do is you have to come back into your calmness and examine the world again in a calm way, which is bloody impossible if, well, wait a minute, my son just died. I'm not going to look at the world anymore. So mental trauma basically means to accept the fact that you're screwed up, that it is not going to be the same, that the new world is not going to be the same, and you actually have to have somebody hopefully tell you, well, how can the world, how can this change? A friend of mine many, many years ago said about trauma, he said, the pain is always going to stay the same. You have to make yourself bigger so it's a smaller percentage of yourself. And then it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And basically that means you have to expand your heart, your mind, your consciousness. It sounds like work. You're like, wait a minute, I want it back now. I want this changed right now. And your voice does what mine did. It goes into this moaning, painful yearning. Oh man, is life really like this? There's no answers. And the only answer turns out to be, when a traumatic experience happens, you have to look at yourself and realize you're a walking wound. And like any wound, you have to deal with every part of it. If you go to the doctor, they're not going to just give you a bandage. They're going to say you have to take maybe antibiotics, or you have to go to a therapist. Sometimes you just have to eat better. That's really important. Nutrition is giantly important. But you have to, it's almost like life kicked you in the butt and said, you got to get your whole life together. You have to get your whole mind. You have to get back on track. If you had a traumatic experience and you might think it's something you did as your fault, maybe it was. And from now on, I'm going to be different. And how you do that is you get yourself healthier. You get your mind healthier. And what's really, for me, in my experience, what I felt the real reason to get healthier is, if you have children, they copy you. They copy your emotions. They copy the way you do things, your attitudes. Even if they love you or hate you, they still copy you. And if you don't heal yourself, they don't learn how to heal either. If something traumatic happens to them, they don't know what to do. They just freak out. So basically, in terms of, I mean, like your sister died, right? And it's like, of course, for I don't know how long, I didn't want to live. You just, no chance. But there's always, my son wants to have a happy life. He's still little. I don't have a choice. And it's like, okay, did I do that out of willpower, or I had a good reason? Mm-hmm. So how did the mental stuff heal? It's like, I don't know, I'll struggle through and do the best I can and try and figure it out. And then it comes right down to the main thing. If you had trauma, or if you probably even had derealization, you need to ask people who've been through it. You need to get help. You need to get advice and guidance, and you need to trust those people, especially when they tell you it will get better. I mean, everybody who's lost their first love, your parent comes up and says you'll get over it, and you're going, not a chance. And it's the same with trauma. You will get over it. It takes longer. It's a lot harder. It's a harder life's lesson.
Okay, you already talked a bit about acceptance now, and that's actually one of the big questions that everybody has. Okay, if they have trauma, what can they do to heal? And acceptance was great. We talk about that a lot too. For getting out of depersonalization, you have to accept it. So there's similarities to trauma as well. Can you maybe just dive into like, okay, what else can you do to get to heal from trauma?
Well, first of all, if you've taken a major blow, you've survived it. And if you can survive that major blow, you can survive healing from it. So just accept, if it happened, accept that I can heal from it. And I've seen little kids that are hurt do that. I've seen people of all ages that you really wouldn't think would survive. They do. They just find the wherewithal and they make it with help. Time is a great healer, of course. That helps a lot. I don't actually think you get to decide to accept it. I think you literally have to maybe make a decision, but you just simply have to go for it or struggle through the day. That's a kind of acceptance. Tomorrow, I'm here again. Every day is a new day, whether you struggled through yesterday or not. And you have to be aware that when you've had a great trauma, it keeps coming up in your body, sometimes in depression, sometimes anger, sometimes pain, sometimes in imaginary fears. It just keeps repeating over and over and over again. And after you've had enough of those things, that means you've survived it 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. And things like this is never going to end. But basically, this is how you heal. You just continue to relive it. When your sister died, we had a telephone answering machine with a message that actually had said when somebody answered it that, you know, our daughter has died, it's been this long, we've missed her, whatever we said, right? And at first it was terrible. But then we had a visitor that said, why don't you change that? And your mother and I both at the same time said, no, this is helping us. We're hearing this over and over. It's easier, not necessarily every time, but every day. Somehow it's helping. We had no idea that would happen. We had no idea that being hugged by strangers would happen, or hearing everybody else's stories, and especially that accepting that everybody goes through this. The whole idea that every family has a story eventually. Every family has a really harsh trauma that branches out through their entire family tree, down and up, and everybody has to cope with it in their own way. Even children, like so-and-so died, and you think, well, they don't understand that. Well, they certainly see what's happening to all the adults, and this, like you did. I mean, what a struggle. So accepting that there was a trauma and accepting that you were hurt means accepting that as long as I'm hurt, it's actually difficult for the people I love. And if I'm gone, if I kill myself, they're double jeopardy. They're in horrible. And the whole idea is, don't you do that to him. Don't you leave. You know what I mean? So those are the kind of things. But I think in order to get better, the real key is you have to trust the people you love, trust the people who have been through this, and you have to trust the idea that you recognize you're not healthy. And if you're not healthy, that helps you trust other people. And
okay, that's really good. Okay, one, accept it, then see that you're not healthy, and then if you do that, you even can get other people to help you.
Yeah.
So another interesting question is, like, how long will it actually take to heal from trauma?
So I can speak from my experience and actually from talking to a lot of other people. For me personally, I found out that everybody has that question, and everybody heard something from someone that answered that question, at least to get you to take a deep breath. I met someone whose pregnant wife and child died in a car wreck. And he told me it took a good 5 years for him to be healthy again. And to me, it's like, okay, 5 years. But now I'm 28 years past her death, or something like that. And for me, it turns out that there's not one healing. Here I am, and now I'm healed. Didn't work like that. You heal in different phases to different degrees. After just a few years, I still was pretty confused. I was happy. I was totally happy to experience my son's love and his playfulness and his soccer and all that stuff. And that was just life-fulfilling. After she died, the time I spent with the other loved ones felt life-fulfilling. Just so good. Sorry. So, 5 years down the line, I feel a lot better. I write some poems, I write some information, a journal about it. I think, oh, I'm pretty much over this, or I understand it now. 3, 4, 5 years later, I write in the journal on the anniversary of a death. It's completely different stuff. Completely different sense of self. You know, the same old thing, like when I was a teenager, I was an idiot. It's kind of the same thing, you know. 8 years later, when I first had trauma, I was nuts, you know. And it's like, well, I'm not like that anymore. It's like good 10 years have gone by. Now it's like 28 years ago or whatever it was. And the truth is, if somebody asks me, how does it feel now? Are you over it? Well, I remember it, but I can't go back to those feelings. It's like they were built out of a stone wall and that wall has fallen apart, doesn't exist. I can remember it. I can listen to music and get back into the feelings. But in all honesty, the horror and terror just simply doesn't exist anymore in my body. Maybe I made myself bigger. What I think really, really worked is I made the effort to continue to love. And I expanded not just my love from what was lost, but I expanded more to my son and then his whole soccer team when I was a coach, or to other people, or to the kids that I worked with who were acutely ill. I just expanded that love, and all of a sudden, my love is bigger, I'm bigger. And am I healed? The trauma will always be there. I know lots of people who cry over children who died 40 years before, but that's not the goal. The goal is to continue to make steps and then look at yourself and your life and go, I'm happy. I'm glad I'm here. Yeah. I wish like heck she was still alive. And I would trade places immediately. But it's not just her anymore. It's all the children I've seen die in the clinic and the hospice. I cry. It's like the whole idea of life hurts sometimes. And only when this guy makes you start talking about it does it really get hard again. Most of the time, life's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one more question. What would your advice be for people who are experiencing trauma or have been affected by trauma?
Of course, to say that you get over it, that there are phases, that you need help, to search for help. But the advice isn't really for the other people who have trauma. The advice is for the person, what should I say? How should I be? The listener has to be incredibly patient. You have to take a deep breath as best and with a loving heart. You have to be attentive and kind and interested in everything they say. You have to give them space to talk, to let them let go. They don't need to tell you anything. They don't need to come to any conclusions. They simply need to let it out and more out and more out, and to know that it's okay to let it all out, that you're there for them, that you trust them and they trust you, and you have permission to just scream if you want, because you really need not to be a sounding board. You need to be a patient grandparent, no matter what age you are. That always helps you. You can always run to your grandparent if you're a kid. That's what you need. And you don't have in your mind, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to do any of these things. It's 100% trust and support and patience, and never stop loving them.
Okay, thank you, Dad. Great advice. And I'm sure that helped a lot of you out there too. And yeah, just keep on going.